Ambassador Hoff, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
The crisis in Syria, you've called it the problem from hell.
Yes.
Explain that to me.
Syria really is a problem from hell. For the past 4.5 years, what passes for a government in Syria has had as its principal survival strategy a policy of collective punishment and mass homicide. So this is a problem from hell, and it's tough for the West to try to figure out how to address it.
The loss of lives have been in the hundreds of thousands now.
Yes.
Is there a solution to this problem you've just outlined?
There's certainly no silver bullet. There's no magic fairy dust that's going to solve this anytime soon. But what I think is essential, if we want to talk about putting Syria on a pathway to some kind of political settlement, is to make sure that attacks on civilians stop forthwith. The barrel bombs, the gravity bombs, the artillery shells, and the missiles, all directed at civilian residential areas.
But the key question is how? That seems to be the sticking point, whoever you speak to, or whichever forces are operating in the country. How do you do that?
Step number one, which I think is probably obvious, is that the United States and its partners need to be leaning on Russia and Iran relentlessly in a diplomatic sense to get their client, Bashar al-Assad, out of this dirty business, out of the business of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Do you mean out of the power that he's in, the position that he's in as leader of the country?
No, not necessarily getting on an airplane and physically leaving, but stopping the barrel bombing, artillery shelling, gravity bombing, and missile attacks on civilians.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because that is the key sticking point. We were going into another round of talks in Vienna, and the issue about whether or not Assad stays or goes seems to be the big thing that separates America and its allied forces from Russia and Iran. So with a problem like that, how are you ever going to make progress there? Yeah,
this is the big substantive difference between the West on the one hand and the Russians and the Iranians on the other hand. Secretary Kerry, in his remarks today at the U.S. Institute of Peace, alluded to the fact that he's still working on this issue with the Russians and the Iranians. My point is, until a very healthy modicum of protection is offered to Syrian civilians, you cannot get to the kind of political process the United States wants. You just can't get there from here. You cannot attract the Syrian opposition to a very serious negotiation if their constituents are being blown away very violently or forced to run to Western Europe.
Well, to that end, John Kerry said earlier today, we are making gains, we are in control. Would you agree with that when you look at the US strategy in the country?
There's probably some tactical progress being made on the ground in certain areas against ISIL, the Islamic State, Daesh. Beyond that, I am not seeing diplomatic diplomatic progress, mainly because I'm seeing no progress on the issue of civilian protection.
Ambassador, we're grateful for you joining us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.